Yep, good to go. Okay, where we go?
So yesterday I declared an emergency, a major emergency under the Emergency Management Act. That essentially gives me authority to make directions to ensure that we're able to take care of the general well-being of the community of South Australia. A major emergency is declared when there is an event which threatens the health or well-being of South Australians, or where it increases the likelihood of death to individuals, or also where we see a significant disruption to essential services and the normal community considerations that people enjoy on an everyday basis. I think everyone would agree that we've met both of those criteria, where we have a pandemic which threatens the well-being and health of South Australians, and from the restrictions we've seen put in place so far, we also appreciate the fact that we are seeing a substantial reduction in services to the community. It makes the declaration of an emergency quite relevant at this time.
How far do those police powers go?
There are a range of powers contained within the Emergency Management Act, which enable me to give directions to people in terms of movement, closing of facilities, power to quarantine people, take control of assets and other facilities that are necessary to ensure public services are continued, to direct other agencies. So there are a significant range of powers that are available, but those powers are not enacted lightly, and we do that with consultation with the health representatives as well as members of Parliament and other key officials.
So does that mean detention and or arrest?
Sorry?
Does that mean detention and or arrest?
Yeah, there is power for detention, and people who don't comply with directions under the Act may be subject to other sanctions.
How will police enforce the border lockdown?
We're currently building a mechanism to place police officers in key locations around the state. There are 12 points where we have crossings, and we'll have staff there along with staff from PIRSA and DPTI. That'll be up and running by 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. We'll also have stopping capability at the airport and railway station using Australian Border Force and Australian Federal Police alongside South Australian police officers.
Will police also be enforcing social distancing if they see it not occurring?
We have the power to give directions to people in relation to gatherings and movements, but we'll be using that in a measured way on the basis that we'll be focusing on those restrictions that are in place and are subject of a direction. We'll be encouraging people to understand the spirit of these restrictions and what they're trying to achieve, and to apply those social distancing protocols themselves without having to have police intervention.
Are you happy with the way people are complying with self-isolating at the moment?
We've been checking on people, random checking of people who are required to self-isolate, and so far all of the people we have checked are complying with those restrictions and doing so willingly, and I think that's a testament to those people who are subject to this, that they're actually thinking of the broader community other than just themselves. So I'm very pleased to be able to say that people are complying.
How many checks have police carried out so far?
We're not disclosing the number at this point in time. We are continuing to check on a daily basis, and we'll keep doing that.
Will police have the powers to fine people if they don't self-isolate?
We have the power to detain. There are also special powers under the Public Health Act where we can obtain a warrant using a public health official and then execute that warrant to take a person into custody so they prevent causing further risk to the community.
Is there a suggestion a COVID task force will get rolled out here like in Victoria?
We already have steps in place to allocate a designated group of detectives as an investigation team for COVID-related activity, whether that be non-compliance or other matters, and we're putting that team together now.
So just to clarify, will you need a warrant to detain people or to arrest them?
A warrant allows us to take a person into custody and prevent them from creating further risk to the community. A warrant under the Public Health Act would see a person being detained in a health facility, not a correctional facility.
Obviously, police won't, just talking about enforcement in relation to social distancing. Will police, for example, won't necessarily arrest, a group of people if they're walking down the street in close proximity, but will they in fact go and talk to them and say, look, step apart? Is that sort of what police will do?
Well, I think it depends on the circumstances. Family members are still allowed to congregate, so we'll take a measured approach. And if we see people who are clearly not complying with the spirit of social distancing and the restrictions in place, then we'll certainly be providing advice or taking action if that's necessary.
Just back to that COVID task force, how many detectives, you said a group, in Victoria they've got about 500?
Yes, we won't be having 500. We have a different dynamic in South Australia, but we will be making sure that the resources we allocate are appropriate for the type of work and the number of taskings that we think this group should have.
Given the extreme case where you might have a lot of people that you need to detain, where would they be? Where would they detain them? You won't have them in the watch house. Will you be opening up other watch houses at Sturt or Port Adelaide?
We have a plan in place that allows us to scale up and use facilities that we don't often use. But I'm also confident that the overwhelming majority of people will comply with these directions. And I think if there is a need to take action, taking action against people who are significantly compromising the safety of others will probably send a strong message to others. So my expectation is the need to detain people will be very low.
Is it possible that there might be harsher penalties if people don't self-isolate or if people don't adhere to the social distancing laws or rules or guidelines at the moment? Are police prepared to perhaps enforce some harsher penalties?
Clearly our role in the community is to ensure people are held accountable for their behaviour. The failing to comply with the direction under the Emergency Management Act carries a maximum fine of $20,000 I think for an individual and $75,000 for a body corporate. So yeah, there are significant penalties that can be levied if people choose to ignore these restrictions.
And getting back to the border, so you have police officers at every border, on every border, but as many as you can to stop the transfer.
The intent of these border restrictions is to severely limit the number of people coming into South Australia. So we're looking at targeting volume as opposed to every single person crossing. We are locating ourselves at 12 major crossing points that from road that come into South Australia, and we'll be issuing directions to each person who comes across as of 4 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon. We envisage that that's going to accommodate for most people coming into the state, and we also anticipate, with the advice that's being sent out nationally, that most people will change their travel plans and probably think twice about crossing the border if they have to self-isolate for 14 days, including residents returning. The other factor, of course, is we will be making exemptions for emergency services or key essential service personnel, and also people who live close to borders will have some particular exemptions in terms of their regular movement across borders.
Have any officers been tested for coronavirus?
I beg your pardon?
Have any officers been tested for coronavirus?
We currently have about 55 police officers who are subject to self-isolation, and a number of those have been tested, but at this point in time, no South Australian police officers or police staff have tested positive for COVID-19.
What does this mean for your staff? Everyone on deck, there's no one people still able to take leave. What does this mean for the sheer numbers that you're going to need?
Yes. We're currently working through a business continuity plan that enables us to ensure continuous service delivery to the community. We have cancelled leave for all of our executive members. We are currently looking at the requirements to manage leave for the rest of our staff to ensure that we can put people on the front line and maintain that service that the community requires.
Have any of those officers that are currently being tested for coronavirus, have they had contact with members of the public, and have they been advised?
No, the people who have self-quarantined have done so on the basis that they've returned from overseas or have had direct contact with a person who has been overseas. We've got no instances yet of anyone who has had contact with the community as a result of being symptomatic.
Okay, thanks ladies and gentlemen.